Hi there and welcome back again. It's been a long while since my last video, so I thought I'd better get cracking and put something else up. I haven't had much time recently. Kids have been off school, but they've gone back now this week after holidays. Bit of peace and quiet again, and I've got time to do a few more vids. So this one there's a few things I want to talk about today. One of them is the debacle regarding the Horology House Rolex fake that was sold. That was a big deal just end of last week and the weekend. Most of you would have heard about that. And I don't want to bang on about it or repeat what's already been said. I met Chris. I know Chris. I've had lunch with him a few times, and him and a few other guys. The crew here in Perth. I thought I knew him anyway. This has obviously been a pretty bad experience from his point of view and the whole community, really, in Australia and Perth in particular. But globally, the Horology House scandal, they call it, has gone nuts. There's I think in the Rolex forum, like a 40-something page thread about it. Horology House and Chris, I don't know, seemed a bit stuffed really for the moment. I don't know what he's going to do, but anyway, what I wanted to get across with that is that obviously with second-hand watches or pre-owned or grey market dealers, you buy the seller. That's all there is to it, really. There's no it's not rocket science. Obviously, people have learnt now, and this has woken a lot of people up to the flipping culture there is sometimes in watch communities, and on that Facebook group, for example, that Chris launched a few years back, and the whole thing is people were getting desperate for Rolex watches, steal sports models, and buying them online, even though he had a good reputation online. It all come unstuck when things went wrong, and that's why we need to really be careful about having a face-to-face and meeting the seller. Even in that case, if you'd met Chris, you might have been fine. So it's really about knowing the person you're buying the watch off, but at the minimum, a face-to-face meeting and then getting referrals, talking to other people about the person you're buying off is very, very important by the seller. And the second thing is, why does everyone want a Rolex? Maybe we should be looking at other things. People are buying Rolex because they're popping up on Instagram. Every man and his dog, every famous guy's got one. There's a bit of a, we don't know if it's a bubble or if the price is going to come back off. Obviously they have on different models. But with Rolex, Patek, AP, and a few different brands, mostly those ones to be honest, the prices have just gone nuts. And there's a massive premium over retail price if you want to buy one. So just buy something else. Buy an indie watch, an independent brand watch. I would push them because I like them and I sell a few brands. But or buy vintage for sure. Even if it's not a vintage Rolex, there's plenty of beautiful old Omegas and different watches, even Seikos, and old brands that aren't around anymore that have great running movements. Just be a bit different and get something. I've always told people to get something that you like, not what everyone else likes. Get something that speaks to you. Other people's opinions are overrated, especially when it comes to Rolex Daytonas and subs and everything else. If you can't get one, forget about it. Don't go nuts paying premium and risking your money on these super fakes which are out there. Just get an independent watch for much, much cheaper, and it's something that means more to you, or it's for you, it's not for everybody else, basically. Get something that means something to you, and you can still have a beautiful watch and keep it forever. These watches, if you get a mechanical watch with an automatic, or even a manual wind movement, something you can hand down to your kids, providing it's not quartz really, it'll always be repairable by a watchmaker. And it's something that can stay in the family if you get a nice model. That's all I want to say about that, really. Forget the Rolex. Get independent brands. There's plenty of independent brands out there. I'm not just plugging mine. But actually, now I've reminded myself, I do a wrist check, which I sometimes forget to do. This is a Sealander, which I've just received a few of these from my friend Adria, who owns ESA. This is a blue diver, 41mm diver, beautiful little watch, really nice dial. This is the blue version. It's very thin type bezel there. It's hard to describe the color or to get a good idea of what the color is on this one. It also exists in black, and I also have a green dial with a bronze case. The bronze case is really, really nice as well. That's the ESA Sealander. I have some of the pilot watches, the Airfighter. They're great as well. But this is a real great value for money watch. I've got that on a strap, which is not a typical strap or one that's available on the market yet. It's a prototype kangaroo skin strap being made by a friend of mine, and I will be commercializing those sooner or later on the website. Keep an eye out for that. It's a great little strap, goes with the watch. So that's the ESA Sealander. Have a look at it, look it up on ESA's website, EZA. The brand is just ESA. It's not EZA, it's an old German brand. This watch is made in Germany, in Pforzheim in Germany, and that's where the brand originally came from. Okay, that's that out of the way. What have I got next? I want to keep going through the alphabet of pronunciation of watch brand names, which we kicked off with a while back last year. I've gone through the D's, I think I'm up to E, and I've got Eberhard & Co. is the first one on there. It's an 1887 brand from 1887. They're famous for the Chrono 4 chronographs with the counters all in a row, 4 rows on the dial. Really cool watches. Been around for a while, but they've, I think they sort of hit by the quartz crisis. They came out with a quartz watch after the quartz crisis. They kept going. They've had continual production, I think, through. So it's one of these old little small brands you don't hear about much. Pretty old, nice watches. They've had some cool brands models over the years. Next one is Edox. Again, dive watch mostly these days. They had classic watches. They've been around again since about the same time, 1880 something, 1888. Around that time, there's a lot of watch businesses kicked off in Switzerland. Some of them are still around, some aren't. But Edox has been going for a long time. Then I've got ETA. ETA, obviously, everyone knows about that as a movement manufacturer. That was a consolidation of companies, Valjoux, Peugeot, Lemania, and a whole bunch of, when all the movement manufacturers were consolidated. That was made into ETA by Nicholas Hayek, and still running. They provide a lot of the movements for a lot of different brands, not a watch brand as such. Eterna that's the next one on the list. Eterna was in the same group, basically, back in the day. And they're famous for their Contiki watches, and they still make really nice watches. Their logo is like the 5 little dots, which represents the 5 bearings that they used initially. They were the first ones to use the bearings on their rotor support, having that proper ball bearing support on their rotor, basically, to give it a better winding efficiency. Eterna's been around since 1856 as well, I think, mid 1800s. Then I've got the F's, Favre Loeber. It's a double barrel name, Favre and Loeber, 2 names. So they're relatively common names. 1773, they build themselves as the second oldest brand, Swiss watch brand. They basically, from the quartz crisis, they stopped for about 40, 50 years, as a lot of brands did, and they sort of rejuvenated. The beginning of this century, basically. Then we've got Fabergé. It's like the eggs. Very old jewelry company. They've been starting doing some really, really cool watches. And Jean-Marc Wiederrecht, my friend, the watchmaker, the guru movement developer, the complication developer, has done a lot of stuff for them. They brought out a watch, a DTZ, dual time zone watch, back in 2016, if I'm not mistaken. Awesome watch. Look it up, Fabergé DTZ. And then they brought out, just after that, a concentric chronograph, one where the chronograph hands were on the same axis as the hour and minute hands, which was really, really cool. Hard to do. So that is, that's Fabergé. FP Jaune. Most people have heard about FP Jaune. He's famous for the chronomètre bleu, and also a lot of different movements he's done. I think he started in about 2004. 1999. About the same time as Richard Mille. And he's done quite well. He does a lot of movement with solid gold bridges. Also he does aluminium sports watches he's done. He has that famous ladies quartz, which stops when you put it down or when it's not being used. The FP Jaune is François-Paul Jaune. I've met the guy a couple of times in Geneva. He's from Marseille in the south of France, so he has a really cool accent. I know watchmakers that work for him, and he's done quite well. The watchmakers there, they do some really nice stuff. Usually the watchmakers themselves do the watches from A to Z. François-Paul Jaune doesn't have much to do with the day-to-day watches and the basic watches anyway, but the complications and everything, of course, he does. The chronomètre bleu has gone nuts price-wise, and you can't even buy one these days. There's a 5 or 6 year waiting list. Last time I was in Geneva last year, I asked about it in their boutique. So better off buying a pre-owned one. Beautiful little watch, one of my favourites. Then I've got Ferdinand Berthoud. Ferdinand Berthoud, we'd say it in English, but Ferdinand Berthoud. Berthoud is an old watchmaker from 1750 something or other, and they started up a brand with his name back in 2015. That's owned by Chopard and run by Chopard. Ferdinand Berthoud. Fortis, people know about that. They got a few space watches, a lot of air themed watches, really cool watches. I think the Russians might have worn those in space back in the day. Fortis, I've had a couple of those. They're good watches. They got Frédéric Constant. That's a pretty young brand, 1988. That was started by the Haas couple. I forget their name now, but I've met the guys who owned that brand. They built it into a Dutch couple, built it into a massive brand. Obviously with lots of the Swiss movements, but on their lower end watches for a long time, probably just Chinese components, Chinese cases. They've done quite well. They've sold that now to Citizen, the Citizen Group in Japan a few years back. Massive company. Frédéric Constant has done quite well. Then I've got Gérald Charles, which is Gerald Genta actually. Gerald Genta was a brand that Gerald Genta started. He worked for a lot of different brands, and then Gerald Genta was, as the name and the rights and everything for the company was sold to the Bulgari Group, and then Gerald Genta started up another brand called Gerald Charles, which I think was his second name. I met Gerald Genta a couple of years before he died. Very old, nice old gentleman. Obviously a bit of a superstar in the watch world because of his designs, the influence he's had on a lot of watch designs, namely Omega, AP, Patek, and a whole bunch of others. But he had his own brand for a little while there, and that was Gérald Charles. High complication watches, beautiful pieces. He died in 2011, so I met him a couple of years before he died. Quite lucky. Then we got Paul Gerber, Paul Gerber, who's a German. I think he's a Zurich-based independent watchmaker. Makes really cool watches. Pretty basic, simple, nice dials, and he has one with I forget what he calls it, a triple something or other. There's 3 little rotors in the back, which is sort of all work at the same time. So instead of one automatic rotor, it's 3 rotors, little sectors. He's well known for that. He also worked on the MIH, the first MIH watch, Muséum International d'Horologerie, that really cool MIH watch. Worked on that with Ludwig, the guy who really invented that watch, a lot of parts of that watch. Paul Gerber worked on that, and he's a nice guy. Just a very small independent watchmaker, puts out a very small number of watches per year. I don't know how many, probably less than 100. Then we've got Gérard Perregaux since 1791, a brand in La Chaux-de-Fonds, and it's kind of a funny brand. It's been around a long time, obviously, and it's they've brought out some beautiful movements over the years, and they're known for their Golden Bridge movements, or the 3 Golden Bridges, and quite well known, but it's never really been a brand. I mean, I have had one. I had a one which was basically like a GP version of the Memovox, the same movement, a mechanical alarm. Don't have it anymore, and I've sold a few of them, but it's not really a brand that has really grabbed me, which is probably why I sold the old one I had. I got one. I totally did it all up and sold it. I've been through the factory a few times. Did know a few people that work there, not anymore. I've been through once, the factory, on an open day, and it was a great place. They do some beautiful finishing. They're probably punching above their weight as far as the finish goes, but the watches aren't cheap either. I don't know, people who collect them, they're a great brand, an old brand. Then I've got a Glycine watch. No comment. It's owned by the Invicta Group now, I think. I had a meeting with them a few years back at Basel. Someone was talking about bringing them into Australia, but that didn't happen, not with that guy anyway. Then we've got Graf. Graf is like a German name, but they're a jewelry group, and they've started doing their own watches a few years back, 10 years ago or more probably. Some nice stuff, but they're all totally jewelry based, all big diamonds and everything on them. Then we've got 2 brands which are probably my 2 favorites. Grubel and Forsey, which is Robert Grubel and Stephen Forsey. Stephen Forsey I know quite well. He's a good guy, British guy, and they've done amazing things in the last 16 years. I think in 2004 they launched that company. I've been out with Stephen a few times, and I've been to his manufacturer. They have a beautiful manufacture between the Locle and the Chaux-de-Fonds in Switzerland, up in the Jura, and they have about 100 to 120, maybe more now, I guess maybe up to 130 or 40 people, but they do about 120 watches a year. Maybe again a few more now, but it's not many watches for that amount of people. Roughly 1 watch per person per year. They're expensive watches, but they're beautiful, and the finish on them is second to none. Every single part, every surface of every part, whether you see it or not, will be finished to perfection. That's Grubel and Forsey. They've done really well. Love their watches. Some of them are quite bizarre, but they're complication watches, but also very precise. They're engineered to be precise, basically. That's why they have the inclined tourbillons and everything, to really get a better timekeeping on their watches. And the next one, the last of the G's, is Gronefeld brothers. That's Tim and Bart, both great guys, Dutch guys. Both, I think, worked for Udma Pico Renopapi, APRP, Renopapi. Done complications with them, worked at AP as well, up in La Vallée du Joux. They're both 3rd generation watchmakers for their family. They now are based in Holland, and they have some beautiful watches. Again, like Grubel and Forsey, their finish is superb. I remember when I first saw their watches, maybe 10 years ago. No, not quite, almost. I had a look through a loupe, a really strong loupe, and there was just nothing. There was no fault. It was like, and I made a comment. I remember making the comment. It was a stupid comment, but it looked like it had been photoshopped. It was like an image which was perfect, which was just no blemish, no flaw, no dust, nothing, no spots. It was absolutely, the movement of their watches are absolutely awesome. They have a 1 Hertz, which is like a jumping seconds, which is a really nice watch, and was my favorite until they brought out the 1941 Remontoir model a couple of years ago, which again was a sensational watch. And they do beautiful dials. Tim and Bart are really good guys. They're good guys to have a drink with, but they're Dutch, so they'll definitely drink under the table. I've been out with them a few times, had meals with them, and gone out with them drinking a bit. And they're just really funny guys. They don't take themselves too seriously, but they take their watchmaking seriously. They call themselves the Horological Brothers, which is their kind of little brand now, and that's it's working really well for them. I'm really happy to see that they're expanding their workshop. They're getting more and more people. They still have a very small production. They do limited editions of 20 pieces, that sort of thing usually, or pieces on demand for their complication watches. They have I think they have chronos as well, but they have some. Their 1 Hertz was, I think they've finished making them now, that series, but absolutely beautiful watch, which I would own in a heartbeat if I could afford it. And that's the G's, and I think I'll stop there. This video has probably gone long enough. I want to try and bung this up tonight if I can upload it. We'll keep going with this alphabet thing later on and see what else comes up in the news. Cheers.